100%. And so on the day that we're shooting the Martini Henry, we're out there and we have like 10 other guns that we're supposed to shoot. And Henry's like, today's the day, we're doing this one. And I'm like, I don't know anything about it at this point, right? Like, I just know it's the Martini Henry and it's going to make a lot of smoke when it shoots. Like, that's my level of knowledge on this thing at the point in time. And so he like takes like 2 shots. He's like, all right, I have to clean it.
What?
You're like, this is me. I'm like,
fuck?
what? He's like, yeah, like, have to clean it after every few shots, man, or else the accuracy would be really bad. Like, it was like an hour and a half of just like baking in the sun. You're like, it's like I just remember hating you so much. I was so. If you ever played back the entire audio from that, I'm like cussing up a storm at him. I'm like so pissed. You can hear it in my.
But it was one of those. Yes, I mean there was a lot of trial and tribulation in getting that particular episode, but it is singularly one of the more interesting ones because we don't deal with it every day, and it is a genuine 1872 build Martini Henry.
Yeah. How the hell did you get that back? It's a great video. How'd you get that back from Afghanistan?
Do you want to do the intro this time, or you want me to?
I'm going to let you take this one.
Or do you want to do the intro since you're a professional as well? You've been doing this longer than I have.
I am not a professional audio recorder, but what would you like me to say? Howdy, partners. Welcome to the Big Tex Ordnance podcast. My name is Hank. I'm here joined by my friends, Chris, the Assistant Lord of War. We have Ike, the janitor in charge. And we have Ian, the main cat herder of the group. Mm-hmm. Shall we say the VP of cat herding operations?
Yeah, that'll work.
And I am your host, Henry, and this is Josh.
Thanks for joining us here on 9 Hole Reviews.
Yeah.
And the Big Tex Ordnance podcast. So welcome back, everybody. So we've been hanging out with Henry and Josh here for a couple hours in the warehouse already today, or about an hour, just discussing cool stuff and some interesting things that might happen in the future. But we won't go into that. And for our audience that doesn't know who 9 Hole Reviews
You're wrong.
You are wrong, because luckily they are local. I found out that y'all shoot on the same range that we do. You're in the Houston area. This is y'all's second time up to see us in the last couple weeks. And we just wanted y'all to come out and jump on the podcast because I would like to know more about how y'all got to do what you're doing now with the podcast, with the YouTube channel, with Slate Black, and how all that came to be. And so also join us are Ike and Ian. Ike is very festive today.
I am. I'm in my Magpul ugly Christmas sweater and beanie, so available at magpul.com.
Or Big Tex Ordnance.
Or BigTexOrdnance.com.
Even better.
Jesus. The paid promotion's already starting.
So, Henry or Josh, who wants to start?
Well, I mean, thanks for having us in the first place.
Anytime, dude.
I mean,
Thanks for coming, man.
We've both separately bought from Big Tex Ordnance. I actually never gave it, any thought because it came and went straight on to our rifles, everything that we ordered. So kind of surreal being here, hanging out with a crew that deals with everything that we've seen on the customer end. So I guess Josh and I we started a what has it been, like a decade plus ago?
Like
we started shooting
closer to 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So Josh and I actually we came from non-shooting backgrounds because we both grew up in locations that were restrictive for firearms. So I grew up in Hong Kong.
Yeah, and I'm from Boston.
Yeah.
We're in Boston.
North Shore.
Nice. I have family in Newton.
Okay.
So I grew up going to the Cape and everything.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So if you go to Josh's house and there is a ball game going on, and he's had a few in him. Very evident that he's from
Oh,
Boston.
nice.
Does the
It comes
accent come
back.
out?
Oh, yeah.
Look,
Boston.
it's something I'm not proud of, but
So-
I won't deny it.
So, anyways, I mean, of all those years, you know, like we started off as gun nerds, and then coming to, I mean, I'm not saying it's just a journey that we've gone through and gone down the road, a journey of learning about firearms, and then finding ourselves here. I mean, again, yeah, thank you for having us. But the journey, I think, itself has been fairly unconventional compared to a lot of people in Texas, per se.
That's probably one of the things that I'd say makes our perspective on things a little bit different or maybe unique compared to some people's. And it's my personality is such that I'm a perfectionist with stuff that I do. It's just why I gravitate toward the competition arm of this stuff. And even within that, you have so many very, very strong opinions coming from this particular space particularly. You know, it's like it's this way or you're wrong, it's this way or you're wrong, it's this way or you're wrong. And I think for a good period of time, I probably bought into some of that to a degree, especially within the competition circuit, because you could see very easily like what worked and what didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, one of the things that I've gained with my relationship with Henry and shooting with Henry is this wide breadth of how firearms, their design, the implementation and the logistics behind their implementations, and the overall general history that comes with a lot of the firearms that we brought on the show, how all of that stuff plays such a significant role. And some of the stuff that I thought was like the most important thing really only are like 5 years old. You know, it's just really, and it gives you at least for me, it gave me a moment of pause to go, like maybe this thing that I like care a lot about has way deeper roots and meaning and, you know, history based around it than what I was giving it credit for, which is something that when I shoot with Henry and work with him on projects is where I gain the most value, right? Because I gain value from doing the show by learning stuff from him.
It's a mutual. So I guess we could talk about the show itself
Yeah.
if anyone out there hasn't watched it. It's not a huge channel, I wouldn't say, but it's a channel that we've been running for a few years off of YouTube. And we try to combine the context to the performance of firearms. So let's say just recently we did, what were the last three that we published?
Block 2,
The Block 2 M4.
K1A1.
The K1A1, the Daewoo, and then I think before that the M16A2.
Mm-hmm.
So all three of those firearms are interesting. We've seen it in the past, but what we wanted to show outside of the core performance of the firearm was also the developmental process. What was a thought process that generated this thing that we know, that we see, that gets toted in our popular culture circles. So the M16A2 having some of those features that the commission that brought the M16A1 to the M16A2 standards, what they were facing, and then more importantly, our generation, I think Chris, you and I, the generation that went to war using the M16A2 without optics in the 2000 and change time frame, and how that was like. Some of the methodology of using the firearm and talking to some of the guests who had used them in the battlefield, and some of the challenges they had and how they overcame those challenges. We're talking about an iron sight main rifle that was pushed into war the same time we had night vision and red dots out there in the battlefield, and how that impacted the development of, well, a lot of things. I think the M16A2 was pretty much the peak rifle of the 90s era before we stepped into the GWAT era when modularity was a thing. So, in short, we try to look at the firearm's performance, and then we match it to the historical context, and then the deployment context, the employment context of the firearm, and learning more about it and seeing how it goes as a trajectory in the future, or how it's been in the past, and postulate from it.
That's the one thing that I've been a big fan of y'all's channel for years. I mean,
man.
you guys did a video about the Martini Henry.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. You can watch that video to a video about the Block 2 to a video about a K98. So it's like, all right, time to get my nerd on. And it's not like, just you guys shooting at the ranch, shooting at targets, but you like put the science and the nerd and like the history behind it, which is like,
That's the cool part.
Yeah.
I like that.
For the record, Ian kicked me out of my chair, moved the chair over there because he wanted to sit in between these guys.
He's been taking selfies all day.
All
He's just been,
day
I'm
long.
fangirling. Leave me alone.
Every time the doorbells rang, he's like, "Is it them?"
Are they here?
Ian and I text.
Yeah. Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter.
No, but I think coming back from our, a lot of us, I think, are exposed to firearms, even if you weren't growing up in a shooting background. Like if you didn't grow up with a family on a ranch with 200 acres, where you herded cattle, which would be freaking awesome growing up in that environment, by the way. But if you grew up as a young boy in Hong Kong or a young boy in Boston, you would still see. I'm looking at a drawn fire image back there. You would still see evidence of firearms in pop culture. But I think us growing up in the pre-internet age is a little bit more interesting, because when you go around and you try to find the background of these firearms, the pop culture associated to these firearms, the myths start to generate, and you come out with all these different things that people said. Did you know that there's a bottle opener on the Galil? Oh, really? And for the longest time, I thought it was the bipod on the Galil that opened bottles, but that's the wire cutter in the front, and it's the little hook that holds on to the wire cutter in the back that actually opens bottles. So you look into, you learn about all these little myths and all these little things, and I think curious minds start to do research. And in a pre-internet age, I think that's where it sounds like a lot of all of us grew up in the pre-internet age, where we were just trying to look at what guns they used in pop culture. Let's say like in Pulp Fiction.
Oh yeah.
Like you've got the MAC-10 in Pulp Fiction. Yeah. Like I was when I watched Pulp Fiction, that was the one gun I wanted to shoot right after that. I wanted to shoot the MAC-10, an automatic MAC-10, and that remains in your mind, and you start doing research on it. But there really wasn't a lot of avenue for that. So I think as we step into the internet age, a lot of us start trying to find what is the source for this meme gun. What is the backstory to this type of thing? And a lot of us start trying to decipher what is or what isn't. That's been passed down through the years. I mean, what are some gun myths that we grew up with?
Glocks can go through a metal detector.
That's
Oh,
a good
yeah.
one.
Oh yeah.
The Glock 7?
Yeah.
It's a porcelain gun that you can't afford with 3 months of your salary.
Yeah. What is Die Hard?
Yeah.
Was that Die Hard?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or black talons wiggle their way through Kevlar.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's more of an ammo myth, but
I don't know. It's kind of funny because when you talk about this in context, the same stuff still exists now. It's still perpetuated now, right? There's still people who represent that like XYZ thing is true, and will go as far as like literally doctoring images or like lying. It's the story of the fisherman's tale. Like you wouldn't believe the size of the fish I caught, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that in spite of the fact that information today is so widely available, when we started the show, I'd say one of the things that we at that time we'd been shooting for, maybe almost 10 years together at that point, like off and on. Henry was in Afghanistan and in Germany for a number of years with the military, and whatever, life does life things, but we were still friends and we still shot whenever we saw each other. It was like that was the thing we did. And when we first started the show and we started to get results that pointed to a certain way, It didn't align with the popular narrative necessarily on those things. Probably the Mark 12, original Mark 12 video that we did was, I remember one where we were like, man, like, we're not getting sub-inch groups with this rifle. Like, maybe it's the rifle. Got a different rifle. Same exact size groups, like within context, right? Like, but like, let's try more ammo. Let's go out a different day. Let's go to a different range. Like
suppressor, no suppressor.
Yes. And the results were repeatable. And we even later, a year or two later, we even bought another Mark 12 just because to try it, and then did an update video being like, nope, still the same result. And when we posted that, so much flack. You guys don't know how to shoot. You don't know how to do this. You don't know how to do that. It's like, all right, like maybe so. Like we'll put up our hands and say that there's possibility that we're inducing error into a subject matter or a test or whatever. But when you looked at that, the popular belief that was perpetuated through pop culture or through online forums or whatever else was, this is like a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch gun, definitely sub MOA. And, you know, it's phenomenally good. That's why it's so good. It's like, no. It's not those things. Like, it's not a 1/2 inch gun. It's not a 3/4 inch gun. What was our average? It was like 1.3 inches or something like that.
Highly ammunition dependent.
Yeah, ammunition dependent. It's a 1.3, 1.5 inch gun. But that's not what makes it good or bad. Like, it's probably one of the most phenomenal rifle platforms out there that you could be using. But its virtue is actually in the fact that you don't need a sub-inch gun in order to shoot 5, 6, 7, 800 yard targets. And that is, I think, probably one of the biggest, I would say, value adds that we've represented or presented on the show in some way, shape, or form.
So I think one thing that you guys know why it's 9-hole reviews, because we shoot 9-shot targets.
Oh.
I guess that makes sense. All of our accuracy tests, if it's on paper, it's 9 shots, pistol or rifle. Well, I guess if you use a shotgun, conveniently one 12 gauge double-aught buck will accomplish that for you.
Done here.
We're done. But and that high round count, I mean, mind you, we're not heat stressing the rifle out. That high round count induces certain mechanical inaccuracies, or it shows certain mechanical inaccuracies that a 3-round group just statistically cannot represent. So I think as we were getting into it, and I came from an era, I have an M14 converted to M21 that I have spent thousands of dollars on and seeked out, honestly, the probably one last living gunsmith who did it for the AMU. To convert it to the Army M21 standards. And I got that because back in college when we started shooting, all the guys at the CMP club the CMP matches, they're like, the M14, Sonny, that's an inherently accurate rifle. Like, oh, really? Okay. And then I took it and I realized, why is my iron sight M16A2 out shooting this inherently accurate rifle? This doesn't add up. So that's when we started. That's when I personally started using high round count tests for my personal use, and that started the premise of 9-hole reviews. Now, down the road, I think one of the programs that we've been running is Practical Accuracy. It's basically a known distance course, a KD course that we step rifles out at distance. We try to use as standardized ammunition or store-bought ammunition, or if we make the ammunition ourselves, we try to make it to factory spec as much as possible. And we test them out at distance to see how they do. And one of the first ones we did was the AK-103. Now, when we started that, this was the era when people were saying AKs, you can't shoot past 200 meters with it. I know that for a fact that we've gotten shot by AKs past 300 meters. I know that we were getting shot by AKs at past 300 meters. And so when I started hearing that from NCOs in the military, who hadn't really dealt with AKs much and had this idea that AKs can't shoot past this distance, I mean, that was kind of a red flag, thinking, these are guys who are going out to fight. And they're running on really bad intel about some of the most encountered weapon systems that our opponents use. And so that's what cued us into, why don't we do this KD range to show people in one continuous shot that we could actually reach 500 yards. That was actually a pretty arbitrary distance that we chose.
Yeah.
It was just because the range had 500 yards.
Right. We didn't start at the ranch. We started, where is it?
Triple C.
At Cawthorn.
Oh,
yeah.
And Cawthorn had like a very obvious like 2,500, and then it got like kind of crazy after that. So it was like, oh, well, we'll just shoot 2,500 then.
Yeah.
Because that's all like right here. It's all within the realm of what we can demonstrate and show. And
yeah.
Yeah.
And it cleared a regular Russian barreled AK-103. Well, it's a Saiga converted AK-103.
iron sights.
Iron sights.
Yeah.
Shot out to 500 yards within at the very beginning of the second magazine. It cleared 500 yards. And so from then we started thinking, hey, maybe we should turn this into a thing. We could test more rifles on this KD range available to us. And then we started phasing in the discussions. I think that's been a big thing because we wanted to talk about the history, the implementation. Now it's just turned into its own beast where we interview people who have used it outside or who have developed the firearms. And yeah, the show has taken its own legs and journey.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no.
No, which is really cool because, like, I sit down and watched part of the M16A2 video, right? And you're sitting there in the prone and you engage all the way out to 300, and now you're like, all right, and hit the drum. I was in the military for freaking 14 years and never used the drum.
Yeah.
Besides the mechanical clicks that you needed to do when zeroing on paper target at 25, because we didn't do that. That's nothing. And I'm like, oh, I want to go shoot with Henry. Henry, let's go. Because I got my Car 98, and I want to use that little sliding thing on the iron sights. I want to do all that.
Yeah.
But you don't see that typically on a YouTube channel going in that on a practical timed accuracy standard like that. It's
Your Army too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so we qualled up to 300 meters.
That's it.
There is no reason for us to slide to click the drum. Zero.
I never even touched an M16 in my military career. I was Army too, and I've never. It was M4 my entire.
Oh, you baby.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I love the A2. I know it's got a mixed reputation, especially towards the end when we were in they were pretty silver, let's say, in appearance. But I think you were talking about qualling on long distance. We never touched the drum in the Army because 300 meters was where we maxed out, and that was a combat zero for the A2. But pre M16A2, when the Marines, they all qual to 500 yards or 500 meters, depending on what range it is that you're using. When they use the M16A1, now the rear sight was a development that the Marine Corps had a lot of feedback in for the M16A2. So just to preface this, prior to this, you had the M16A1 that did not have the drum on the rear sight for elevation, and it only had a two-position L-shaped flip-up sight that had L for long range, not low light.
This is a personal thing on the channel where Henry said it correctly, but oh my, the internet thought he was wrong.
That's another myth that we could go into. But
yeah, go on.
The M16A1 has two sighting distances: the battle sight and then the long range sight. So one's for 300 and then one's for 460 meters. And so the Marines, they'll use either or, but then when they're qualifying, their drill instructors will walk around with a freaking nail and click the front sight up for 9 clicks to get the necessary engagement distance out of the rifle. And so it's pretty absurd what people had to do in order to artificially make a qualification. But what Josh was talking about, the L for the low light, is another myth, because the M16A1s, well, we're really nerding out on this podcast. The M16A1 had had
That's what the people want.
two different types of rear sights on them. The early, or what was most used during the Vietnam era, would be the two distance, the long range and the combat range sight. But then in the later production models, you had what you would call the Prometheus sights. I know it sounds like a Marvel comic, the Prometheus sights, where you had a tritium bar in the front sight, and then on the rear sights you would have a wide aperture for low light, and then the standard aperture for combat sights. And so depending on the era you were in the military, you could have used either or. Late era, they would have had a low light sight. So those guys, when they see, oh, he flipped to the L, start angrily typing on the keyboard. The L is for low light. It's like, actually, you could do the meme like, actually.
Back in my day.
So, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of, sorry, I've just been going on and on.
No, this is
No, this is it.
awesome. This
But
is
a lot
gold.
of the myths that we grew up with, that we learned as we were coming down to Texas, shooting with some old guys on the range, learning the M14 is quote unquote inherently accurate. All of that sort of developed us into, I don't know if skeptics would be the right word, but inquisitive minds to try to find out what's the backstory to this,
Chris, you said something, and you said you don't usually see on YouTube like someone shooting like that, right? Henry has a unique skill with iron sights. He's a very good shooter with optics too, right? He's just generally a very good shooter. But I have not met anybody who had. I'm serious, and like this is one of the things that I find particularly interesting about shooting with Henry. I've learned so much about shooting at distance, and this is coming from somebody who was already like quite good at doing this thing, right? But with optics, like where it basically feels like it's cheating, right? And then he'll sit down and be like, "Let me just." Like, yeah, we're going to, like, slide this here. Like, yeah, I'm just holding on, like, the target, like, 3 targets over to the left. Like, let's see where this goes. Oh, yeah, we hit it. Like, oh, that's cool. All right.
Good spatial awareness.
Yeah, it's I think it is testament to the fact that not many people can do it, and that I can't do it. I know I can't. Like, I've sat with you, and you're like, hold here. And with an optic, I'm like, right on. Okay, I know exactly what I'm doing. I can hit it. Fine. When you start putting iron sights there, beyond like 3, I'm kind of useless.
Yeah.
Like I can go to 3. I don't know if it's because my eyes aren't good enough. I don't because I don't know how to use the front sight blade in the right technique. Like some of the stuff that you've talked about on recent episodes, with like bracketing with this front sight blade in a certain way against a target, and leveraging, proportionate elements of the front sight blade, and it's interesting because there's certain things that I've heard that, remember I was saying, like I thought this was Bible because someone told me this at one point in time. The thinner your front sight, and it's somebody who was very skilled, but they said it a one-liner, and I took a one-liner as this is then therefore Bible forever. And it was the thinner your front sight, the more accurate you can be, because you have the best perception of where that sight sits within relation to your target. You're covering the smallest amount of the target. It's like, oh yeah, all of that makes perfect sense to me. But then Henry taught me this idea of using the width of your front sight to bracket against a target to help offset for wind. And if the front sight is too thin, you're not going to be able to do that effectively because you won't be able to gauge and judge it accordingly. And I'm like,
And
right?
when you figure out, that front sight's actually 18 inches wide at 300, and you need to hold half value wind, and then what does that now look like? Because now your front sight's actually only 6 inches wide at 300, right?
Because you use it as a measuring device for you. Exactly. Yeah.
I will say the Marines do teach things like that. They have an emphasis on shooting against wind, and I think a lot of us in the civilian world, because it's difficult finding a range that you have more than 100 yards.
Yeah.
We are blessed in Texas, and not even everybody has access to a long distance range in Texas that we do. I mean, having a 200-yard range in Texas is already a luxury. So that type of a skill or that type of a concept is even more difficult to true for actual practical use. Which I will say the Marines they most certainly go through more training than the Army. It's just what it is. I wish I wish we spent more time on rifle musketry and the Army, but we don't. But what do you guys think about iron sights, though? I feel like this is a topic. Like Josh and I have a lot of conversation about iron sights versus optics, right? Do you guys think that this day and age, the skill of iron sight is obsolete outside of historical development that we do, maybe?
I don't know. Optics are pretty dang reliable now. I know I'm horrible at iron sights, so I guess I'm horrible at magnified optic shooting anyway. So I'm not very good at iron sight shooting. But I think optics nowadays are getting pretty dang reliable and pretty robust. That I think iron sight is definitely a good skill to have, but I'm not sure with the reliability and then also to like the supply chain that we're able to get. Like, I'm talking people overseas. I don't know.
I mean, when you can pick up a Holostone red dot for $180
Mm-hmm.
and throw it on your rifle.
I mean, my
Why
last
not?
build hasn't ever even seen irons. And there's no reason to put irons on it. It's I got an offset red dot and I got a magnified scope, or a 1 to 10. Like, there's really no reason to put anything. If I put another aiming system on it, it would be an IR laser, right? Like, that'd be the next step. Like, irons would just be like, well, why are you putting that on there? Because you've got this, I got an offset irons on the other side. I do think that there's I would like to see a backup sighting system on everything, especially if it's and I'm going to use air quotes here, but work gun, right? Like,
Right.
If you're going to use it in any sort of self-defense capacity, then it should have some sort of other sights on it. Do they have to be irons? No. Can it be a 45-degree optic mounted with another optic as your primary? Sure. When it comes to pistols, like, I don't think that's feasible. I'm not going to be able to offset red dot on my pistol yet, right? But that's something we could do.
The way I've always kind of looked at it is like, I guess what's the mission? Like, I mean, are you off in the mountains of Afghanistan, totally remote, not going to be able to, if your primary goes down, you have a onboard, secondary sighting system. Some people even have tertiary, you have a magnified optic offset and then an IR or visible laser. Are you going to be able to replace that? I mean, I live in the Houston area. I have spare optics at home.
Spare optics. He has a few optics. Everybody.
If the optic on my gun goes down, or I could just pick up another gun. I mean, like, I'm not like in a firefight every day or anything. It's not like I'm out in the mountains of Afghanistan where if my optic goes down, all I have is irons, or if I don't have irons, I'm totally screwed. There's no chance of getting new batteries or a new optic or anything like that.
I think it's a rudimentary skill that is definitely getting more and more optional every day.
And I look at it as like, the point of diminishing returns. Like, how much time do I want to spend shooting optics and getting very proficient with optics, or with iron sights rather, versus spending time doing, this whole plethora of other things that I could be spending time on, and getting better at that. That's kind of how I've always.
If I had to go from 0 to 100 as fast as possible with a new shooter, there would be no iron sights. There would be like, here, this is a dot. Look at the target, hold the dot over it, press the trigger.
Yeah.
Do that again. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. Done. All right, cool. Like, I mean, if you had somebody like you needed to teach how to use a gun very, very quickly, I wouldn't even touch irons.
Yeah. I mean, the only blaster that I have that has irons is my carry handle beater. And it's only time before I put,
I just, for that XM177 that I have coming.
that thing's.
I got one of those Brownells. They're retro. Four times. I'm gonna put that on there.
Yeah,
just because for the carry handle.
Fact.
Just because.
Yeah.
You have to.
You didn't see the Gordon rifle that you had here.
Oh,
last time.
I brought it last time.
He's got a nice clone build Gary
Nice.
Gordon rifle.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
You said something really interesting that struck a chord for me, right? Because I'm all about like maximizing performance, right? I mean, both of you guys sort of alluded to it, but it's like
You're a GM though, correct?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with PCC.
Yeah.
Let's clarify that.
Let's clarify
I mean,
that.
I am
Let's
not.
clarify that.
None of
We
us.
have a GM in the room.
Yeah, I still get smoked with pistols. I'm not
I'm like
a
a
GM.
You're a
Master
master though.
I'm like a low master
Well,
pistol shooter.
But I mean, that's,
master. I'm just a little master.
all right. Caveats have been laid, right? Okay, so because I'm
I appreciate the humility, though.
right, well, because I'm performance driven on that stuff, right?
This guy.
Anytime that I would go and practice shooting, and this is why Henry and I have such wildly different interests with respect to shooting stuff, right? If I were to go and shoot, I would never shoot 95% of the guns that he like makes me shoot, right? Or like brings out for me to shoot for the show.
You're
or
like, where the fuck did you get this thing
Like,
from?
The number of times Henry's like, check out what I just got. And I'm like, I don't care about this. Okay. Is because if I was going to spend time doing something, if I'm going to spend time doing it, I can get 0.1% better shooting with my optic, getting reps on my optic. You know, I think for the average person, the average user, or somebody who cares a lot about performance-based stuff, who skews towards the performance side of the spectrum, having irons is probably completely irrelevant for that specific concept. Like, it's cool, again, like you said, for the historical stuff and whatnot, but man, even like within the context of like, I don't know, end of the world stuff, like ACOGs exist. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's there are optics that are usable pretty much through thick and thin. If the ACOG goes down, I don't know, my irons are probably just as likely to go down. But within the context of what you were saying, that's an important piece that's missed, I think, by a lot of people. It's like none of us are good enough that we don't need reps on the thing that we're supposed to be putting reps in on, whether it's the work gun or your game gun or whatever. Like, to get to be a GM level shooter, maybe other GMs would disagree with this, right? But I just did the same stuff like a lot. Like a lot. It wasn't about being motivated. It wasn't about being like excited. It was just about being disciplined and just saying, like, I'm going to go take 20 reps on like how quickly can I snap my carbine up and have the dot be like directly where I want it on a light switch. Okay, like I'm going to do that for 30 minutes every day. And it's boring as shit. Nobody wants to do that. Like, that's super boring. And it's like the practical, again, like the practical application of even that particular thing. It's like, could it save you in a gunfight? Like, I guess, I don't know. But like, it was a thing that I needed to do in order to be better at competition shooting. So if you want to be better, like, that's what you do. You know, it's just doing the reps.
Shoot more.
Yeah.
And shoot correctly.
Right? Yeah.
I think a lot of times, though, and it sounds like I'm the lone man here. I don't think iron sights are better than optics, obviously. I mean, optics exist for a reason. But I think a lot of times people take it within context to what they are doing with a firearm. For most of the things, when optics exist in abundance in an environment, obviously you're going to want to choose an appropriate optic for the firearm. Now, I'm not talking about like, some 5-25 on your like carbine.
On your 10.5 SBR.
Yeah. Okay.
Listen, there's an entire separate subject here where Henry just like has a thing out. There's a vendetta against 5-25 optics. All right.
I have no problems against 525s. I like 525s.
I'm gonna buy one this week and put it on my carry handle.
I'm going to grab a Voodoo
Well,
right now.
actually, we have them on sale starting on Sunday.
My point on irons is just to have a base level proficiency with them. That's it. I'm not saying that you have to be able to clock 1,000-yard torso targets with irons.
Well, I can't do that with a magnified optic.
That's a ridiculous skill to perfect. It is. Nobody does that. I mean, White Death, Simo Hawa, the Finnish sniper, his kills were all at 200 and some with iron sights. I'm sure he could shoot at 1,000 with iron sights, but would he? Probably not. But my point on iron sights and having a base level understanding of it, I'm not saying you have to, but it's good, is that, there are a lot of iron sight rifles in the world, and that kind of closes your avenue to try new things if you cannot use it. Like, Josh hates iron sights, but he can shoot with iron sights. It doesn't mean that he cannot use iron sights. He just doesn't prefer it. I think that's going to be a big thing that people should delineate, though. It's kind of like stick shift cars exist. Most of the cars in America are automatic transmission. It's great to know both, because one day if you fly to Europe and want to rent a car to see all of the lovely things that France or Germany has to offer, you don't have to pay 10 times the fee to rent an automatic transmission vehicle to go enjoy the beauties of some castles.
Yeah.
Same theory on that. Is just to have a base level understanding is my thought.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I think anybody that shoots seriously should have an understanding on how iron sights work. I mean, how to adjust your windage, your elevation, how to zero. I think that would absolutely make sense to do that.
I would like to take a new shooter, and I've got a little bit of instructor background in the firearms realm, and I think it would be interesting to be able to take a new shooter, eliminate I'm going to try to teach you how to see on 3 different planes all at once. Here's a dot. Mm-hmm. And that way you're really focusing on, let's say, for instance, on pistol, you're really focusing on grip and trigger control, and then just put the dot where you need to put the dot, right? And focus on that aspect of it, and that way they can see immediately the feedback they get downrange by being able not have to worry about, all right, no, that's not a correct side. That's not a correct side position. Okay, what am I can't focus on the front side. I can't, all I'm seeing is the rears. Okay, I'm target focused now. Eliminate all the issues you have with a sighting system, with iron sights, because they just don't do like an optic. But you also have to teach that, being able to, and this is, for instance, we went to Average Joe's last weekend, and we're standing around for 45 minutes before we get to shoot on the first thing, and we get up, we load, I make ready, and the timer goes off, and I hit my stage, and as soon as my 1 to 10 gets on the rifle, well, my reticle's off. All right, cool. It's etched. Like, oh, well, that sucks. Dink, 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 dink. Like, it wasn't a stop. Like, there wasn't, I need to stop and turn this on. It was, oh, well, that would have been better to check, Chris. Let's go. And that comes from years and years and years and years of training, where somebody that had maybe not had that been like, oh, now I've got to turn on my optic. I've got to turn it on. So.
He's got stories from using etched reticles and running out of battery.
I'm a weirdo. I actually shoot all my optics off. Well, not like aim points and.
But you're shooting black.
I prefer to shoot black. Yeah. I won't try the new Razor 1 to 10 is a bit of an exception because of how far away the stadia are from that center dot on a first focal plane. But I don't know, the Attacker, the 1 to 6 Razor, all of that stuff. I shoot all of those without illumination on. I actually prefer it. Yeah. I don't know why. It was because, Henry's point about not having battery, when I first was shooting, a battery went out on me while I was shooting, and I was too poor to replace. We were in college. It was enough to even go shoot, right?
Yeah.
Shooting a mag was a thing.
That's a meal. Ramen noodles,
right?
That's a good segue, honestly, because I started shooting irons because I was too poor to buy optics in college, and so I learned. after you bought an M14 and an A2, man, those are big purchases for college kids. I don't have the money to go out there and buy and it was a carry handle one too. So then I had to buy a mount.
Oh yeah.
And then I had to figure it out, and and then I was just like, no, I'll figure it out with iron sights, and I just pushed myself with iron sights more. But
I shot rifles all growing up, and it was scopes. I mean, we're hunting, right? So like, I don't think I even had like past when I was like 4. My first actual real 22. It had a 3x9 on it. It was optics. Like, let's go. And so when I got in the Army in basic training, it was like, oh, this is how you shoot iron sights, which helped me because I didn't know what the heck I was doing with irons. And so when we were taught, I listened as opposed to thinking I knew what was going on.
Let me ask you a question. How do you deal with? I just hijacked your show. Let me ask you something. How do you deal with? You mentioned some instructing background. I know when we were talking off camera, you shared some of what you're working on. How do you deal with that particular element from the perspective of instructing, where shooters come in with I know better, or I know how to do this bias already built in?
The easiest way?
Yeah.
Show them they're wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Go. Yeah, tell us. You're just gonna outshoot them? You're just gonna smoke them on a drill, or what?
Well, it really depends on what you're talking about context wise, and then apply and also depending on ego, right? So if you show somebody that is your classic American male, especially in Texas, that they're just totally wrong, and you make a fool out of them, then you've just lost them as a prospective client if you're an instructor and making money off of it, or if you're trying to better the field and grow the community, you've just lost somebody that could possibly be in your court on that. So it would be a case-by-case basis on how you would show them that they are wrong. And I'll give you a very detailed example. Running a church security class, I handled the marksmanship and safety portion, and then we brought in a career law enforcement guy to do the actual church security, because I was like, hey, I'll teach you how to shoot, and I'll teach you how to shoot fast, and I'll teach you performance-based shooting on this, but I'm not touching the security aspect because I have no idea what's going to take place in this church or the best way for it to be done. And so when we broke that class down, I was like, okay, that guy's going to have an issue because he's got a cross-draw holster with a 1911 that has not been properly maintained, whatever. And so, but the dude was 6'6", big Texas dude. I couldn't, burn them down with a Glock on a timer and then show him that his draw is 2.5 seconds before he ever gets it on target, right? Like, that would have not helped me at all further a relationship with that guy. So I think being able to show somebody wrong that they are incorrect, not necessarily wrong, and teach them a better way. And I'm a firm believer, if you show somebody a proper way to do something in a welcome way, then they're more likely to do that. Because the next day, old boy shows up with a Glock and an inside the waistband holster, and he realized that, like, while this barbecue gun was pretty cool, like, it was not performing on an FBI standard. Like, he was not getting that gun out. And he's like, well, why do you got to stand me by a wall? Well, because this wall is the only thing that you can do this to get the gun out. And I think I answered your question.
You did. I just, obviously, like, I've dealt with similar stuff from a purely performance-based perspective. Yeah. And it can be very hard when somebody has done something a certain way and somebody who is like the young hot shot comes and tells them how to do it. And it's different than what they've been taught or what they're used to. It can elicit a negative response as a baseline.
Yeah, I mean, I think that person has to be open to the idea of, like, they're, expanding their education or their process of doing things. Like, if they're nope, this is how I'm doing it. I mean, Chris and I both saw it working at a range together. It was like there's the people that want to learn, and then there's people that are like, no, fuck this. You're not going to teach me anything I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting skill, though, because I actually find that it bleeds outside of just guns and shooting, too. Like being able to have conversations with people who don't want to take your point of view or your perspective on a thing, and finding the right way to show them the perspective that you're trying to represent and bring them over into that space. It's an art, I think, actually.
It's definitely an acquired skill.
Definitely.
Oh.
So I'm always interested to hear when people have a perspective on that who have, like, that's very obvious. Like you let it out. It was too easy not to ask you about it because it was such an obvious example of one, you know.
So on the topic of cross draw holsters, I mean that was something that was back in the day was developed for cavalry use. You know, both the cross draw and the cavalry draw, which would be a cross draw holster put on this side, so your pistol handle would be facing forward as a cavalry draw. So that was developed for when you're mounted on a horseback, that you could actually draw your pistol instead of scrunching your arm or cross drawing. By cross drawing, you would then flag your horse, right?
Oops, I accidentally shot my horse in the back of the head.
That's a big problem if you're in a cavalry charge.
Shoot.
No, I mean,
Is that really why 1911 has a grip safety?
I
Or have we researched that? Have we went into?
probably have to say if you hail John Moses Brownings and like do a couple dances, and probably he'll appear and tell you why. But I'm kind of on interesting on that note. With the holster placement, especially on the GWAT era, when you're running mounted operations. So if you're in a vehicle, for a hot minute, I remember for a hot minute, we used to mount our pistols on our chest.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're in a TC position, a truck commander position, or in the driver position, it is much faster to just rip it off your chest and go gangsta lean it and clack, 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 clack as you're like trying to exfil. But
it's also hella more comfortable.
I mean, not having that holster jut into the transmission box.
Oh yeah, getting in and out of a Humvee with a leg holster or anything around your waist.
Leg holsters,
absolutely.
Now the leg holsters are a really weird
phenomenal
extension of development and how we got there. But I remember some NCOs who swore by the leg holsters because when they were driving, they would pull the leg holster towards the middle of the thigh and just roll with their M9 sticking right here. Okay.
And then you talk to actually some of the dudes that were making hits on a nightly basis, and they're like, "Pistol? No, we've trimmed down from 12 magazines and all this stuff and 15 grenades and a 9 to, all right, now we've got six mags, a plate carrier, and a rifle and." No pistol.
Hear that, pistol GMs?
But the point is, there's a lot that we develop with shooting techniques, but the application of it, that really drives what you do with it. I mean, it's just another tool for you to keep in the back of your mind. Same thing with iron sights. It doesn't mean you put iron sights on everything. If you have red dot sights, the micro red dot sights for $399, easily obtainable. But I think that's a lot of us. The more we learn, the less we feel like we know, and the more we try to learn. But then there's that danger zone when you're getting into it, and you feel like,
there's a huge graph on this, right? It's one of my favorite graphs ever. It's like when you start and you know nothing.
Oh yes.
Versus when you think you know everything, to back when you know nothing, but you are so much better at doing the thing because you have all of this. There's a whole, I forget what the breakdown of that thing is called, but there's an actual.
The Dunning-Kruger effect.
Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you can overlay that with the fuck around and find out chart and see where you end up on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to the point of the gentleman who was carrying a 6-shooter on a cross-draw holster, I mean, if you were mounted security at a church.
Yeah, if you were riding.
Clop, 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 clop. Well, howdy, partner.
Sucking nerds.
I wish there was more, and this is one of those like the nerd things that I like to get into, and like discuss the grand history of appendix carry and like where does that relate to, and then you get into like how humans have carried their tools up front and forward of their hips along their waistband for thousands of years for specific reasons, and you get really deep dive into it. And I would love to go in and even see, this is the nerd part, is like Pirates of the Caribbean, where they were carrying like 14 pistols, and you just get in a gunfight, pow, drop it, pow, drop it, pow, drop it.
You imagine running in a galley with lit grenades.
Yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, sir, I've got to throw these.
Like right now.
What do I do with my hands?
Oh my God! But
throw it now.
But I mean, the development of the way the firearm looks, the way equipment looks. I mean, it has to be tethered to how you want to use it. That's actually something to draw back to the M4, the Block 2 M4 episode that we talked about with Egan and Josh.
I wasn't there.
One of the big things that we brought up, and Josh and I had been talking about this ever since college. But one of the development cycles that you tend to see that was more prominent during the GWAT era was how SOCOM would look at or not SOCOM as a general, but as a whole, but SOCOM as in members in SOCOM would start looking at what competitors were using. And then because then the Block 1 and Block 2 kits were modular, you could pick rail things onto whatever kit you're using overseas. And pre-deployment, they would buy a bunch of kit, take it overseas, and then realize, hey, this is not bad. This VCOG actually works quite well compared to an ACOG because I could zip it down to 1. And then how that starts filtering into the SOCOM's inventory, because then they start using unit funds or personal funds to buy more of to outfit, and then slowly that filters its way up into big army, like how the entire Block 1 kit went into the army for use. I mean, that started off in the Black Hawk Down era when they were zip tying lights onto their rifles. What's a better way of interfacing equipment onto a rifle? And the SOCOM guys were experimenting with it. But a lot of that type of stuff, red dots on pistols, came from the competition world. It came from guys experimenting with equipment that you could buy off the shelf and then pushing out for use. I mean, I think that development cycle is really interesting. That relationship between the commercial end and the military employment end, and how it mutually reinforces itself in actual operations, is a really cool development. And I don't think that's something necessarily foreign to us, because back in the day, Isaac over at TRX Arms did a really good video on the development of arms and how the AR-15's standing is actually closer to what originally we were looking at back in the day, when you would have your own locksmith commercially produce things, or your own gunsmith produce a lock for the firearm and use it in the Revolutionary War, or something along those lines. Those were commercial items brought to the battlefield and trued, and then brought into standardization. Which
look at all this stuff in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's dudes running around with Howelsons, there's dudes running around with Vortexes,
But think about this. A lot of that standardization came from us experimenting with the Weaver rail back in the 90s SF days, and then that turning into the M1913 pick rail standard, and then that turning into something that was copied overseas, because the Russian pick rail copy is dimensionally different from the U.S. ones, but you could still zip it on. You'll feel it if you're kitting out in like a Zenit code out AK. You have to widen the pick rail attachments a little more. The Russian they copied it, but it's not an entire exact copy. But that interface still exists. So then we could then use like a 1P83, I think it was 1P83 optic that we used earlier. Like we can clip a Russian optic onto an M4. I mean, it's the unholy combination of weapon systems, but you could, because of that standardization of the modular concept of weapon systems. So I mean, it's interesting when you delve into how the pick rail, the M-Lock, the key mod type of developments are pushing forward some of the accessories, and that then drives how we solve problems that we face in the battlefield.
I have a question.
Well, what's up, man?
What you guys have shot a lot of guns in your videos. What has been your favorite video or your favorite blaster to shoot?
I know which one I'm gonna throw out there.
Oh, you go ahead then.
Martini Henry.
Yeah.
That was
that right there. He didn't even have to think.
Yeah, that I did not expect that to clear 500 yards. I mean, Rob from British Muzzle Loaders, I've got to give him a shout out. He helped me out a lot, from load development to the standardized drills that the British Army back in the Victorian era ran with the Martini Henry. But that particular Martini Henry I shipped back from Afghanistan. So I never thought I would shoot it. And we went from making the cartridges out of the shot shell hulls to learning how much the British regulation load was to put in there. Have you guys reloaded before?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so reloading black powder is nothing like black powder cartridge is nothing like reloading a regular rifle. A regular rifle, it's just primer, dump the powder, seat it correctly after you do the case prep, of course, and you're done.
Mm-hmm.
The Martini Henry load, after you prime it, you charge it, and then you have to fill it with either cotton or cornmeal, so it doesn't explode the rifle. And then...
So you don't die.
Yeah. So then you put a small disc, like a wax-impregnated paper disc on it that is of .455 caliber. And then you put what you call a grease cookie, which is a pan of beeswax and grease mixture that has cooled, and you press the cartridge in, so there is a layer of grease, and then another piece of cardboard on top, and then your bullet for the .455 Martini is a paper-wrapped projectile. So the paper then interfaces with the lands and grooves. And so it's a science experiment when you deal with black powder cartridges.
Do you remember how much I hated filming that episode?
Oh, it was terrible. It was terrible.
Yeah, because you were cleaning in between rounds. You had your old mayonnaise jar that you were putting the brass into after
disgusting.
You shot it.
Yeah. I just remember it. I'll come back and answer your question in a second. Henry and I, we've changed. The show has evolved, right? And we've changed some of how we do stuff over time. But we used to go out, and when we were dropping episodes multiple times a week and really kicking things off and just starting Practical Accuracy, we had so many people contacting us to oh, shoot this or shoot that. And we had all these crazy guns in inventory, and and we'd have to ship them back to people, so we'd be on time clocks for everything. So we'd go out and
we still are.
I mean, that's not untrue, but it's definitely more measured now, right? So we'd go out, we'd have 15 guns we have to shoot in a day, and it's each of those runs, it's the run itself might only be 5 or 10 minutes long, but you have to zero the rifles. You have to we'll take a couple pot shots out at distance to see all right, well we're pretty close. We know generally speaking where things are. We don't pre-shoot the course, but we'll what is
confirm zero.
Yeah, we'll get a paper zero and then we'll confirm it at distance, right? We got to do all the audio visual stuff, which you guys know perfectly about. It takes a ton of time and effort to get a run actually recorded. So we'd be out there all day, and it's freaking Texas. So it's a billion degrees all the time. We're it
or
was
cold.
not. What's that?
It's either hot or cold.
Yes.
There's no in between. There's no not. Oh, this is a beautiful day to be at the range.
That's right.
Sucks.
It's 100%.
Rarely, but yeah.
100%. And so on the day that we're shooting the Martini Henry, we're out there, and we have 10 other guns that we're supposed to shoot. And Henry's like, today's the day. We're doing this one. And I'm like, I don't know anything about it at this point, right? Like, I just know it's the Martini Henry, and it's going to make a lot of smoke when it shoots. Like, that's my level of knowledge on this thing at the point in time. And so he, like, takes, like, 2 shots. He's like, all right, I have to clean it.
You what?
You're like, this is me. I'm like,
fuck?
what? He's like, yeah, like, have to clean it after every few shots, man, or else the accuracy would be really bad. Like, it was like an hour and a half of just like baking in the sun and being like, it's like I just remember hating you so much. I was so, if you ever played back the entire audio from that, I'm like cussing up a storm at him. I'm like so pissed. You can hear it in my.
But it was one of those. Yes, I mean there was a lot of trial and tribulation in getting that particular episode, but it is singularly one of the more interesting ones because we don't deal with it every day, and it is a genuine 1872 build Martini Henry.
Yeah. How the hell did you get that back? It's a great video. How'd you get that back from Afghanistan?
I had some buddies over at the JAG on Bagram, and they evidently had a system to where they could make affidavits that would clear customs. And they made a couple affidavits because I brought 3 back. One of them.
Possible.
Where did you like? All right, where's the Martini Henry store in downtown Bagram? Like, what?
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I know a guy.
I have receipts. So once they clear affidavits, and specifically Martini Henrys are pre-18, whatever
it's like a historical item.
Code. Yeah, then it's not considered a firearm; it's considered a relic, and it just gets sent back on the USPS.
That's
fantastic.
And it was like I sent it, and then I messaged my buddy. I was like, "Hey, by the way, you may have some things coming in. One of them is for you. Just hold on to the other 2 because I was stationed in Germany." So
that's legit.
Yeah. So
that one does have a good story. If I were to answer that question, like my immediate answer goes to like, oh, it's my comp gun because like that's my gun, like my gun. But I think actually probably it's gonna be one of the gas checked AKs. I think it's the 9er. Mm-hmm. Like Henry's like old like chopped up Saiga 223 gun, because it's just one of the, again, I'm going to go back to performance always, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's one of the most soft shooting rifles that I think it is in line with, I would put it up against any AR, right? Like that particular one, I put up against any AR.
I think part of it, that I bought that when I was in college. I bought it for $250, $240. And the guy had like, he'd already butchered it. He unfortunately cut it short and then didn't mess with the gas port, so he didn't know why it was working. I was like, I'll buy it. So I ended up with it, and for years it was just this basic AK, and he had chopped the rear tang off of the trunnion on the back, so you couldn't put a normal stock on it. So I had to use that stupid Ace stock. I say stupid, it's fine, it's a stock. But I think the thing is, because he didn't mess with a gas port, I slowly opened it up to where it was barely cycling. And then this was the era when people were saying AKs are shit. AKs will not perform. AKs cannot do anything that the AR can do.
Pre KNS piston era, pre any AK like real Western US based modernization stuff.
Yeah, so I think all of a sudden Josh experienced a gas-checked AK, an AK with a gas port that was not drilled ginormous, a la Soviet standards, and it actually, if you watch it cycle, it doesn't touch the back of the receiver, so it is just working on its own, and there is very little perceived recoil. It's like the AK-107, the Soviet. The balanced recoil system. Except it's not the same thing. It's just that the recoil, it never touches the back, so it's just working on its own and canceling out all the recoil.
Slamming it all over the place.
Like an overgassed AR where it's just
the beauty of it is I made it to where you could suppress it, so if you did want more gas, clock the suppressor on it and it just runs. But this was during the era when people were saying AKs should not be run in 5.56. which was strange because the Russians have had the AK-101 since the 90s. Like, it's a proven system. It works with the 5.56, but we just didn't have it in country. So people then spoke in absolutes and saying AKs in 5.56 suck. But lo and behold, it doesn't if you gas check it. And it's actually a lot of fun to shoot. I'm not saying it's better. It's just it doesn't suck. It's pretty fun to shoot. It's a decent rifle.
It's a very fun rifle to shoot.
Yeah. I think though one firearm that so of all of the historical stuff, Josh rarely goes like, "Oh wow, that's really cool." Like I show up with a Swedish Mauser, you go like,
Some old bullshit.
It's a Mauser, okay. It shoot bullet. But
What's split times?
there's one firearm I've gotten Josh to actually go off after I had him evaluate it with me. He actually went out and bought.
Oh shit!
There's one.
What is it?
It's the M71.
The Beretta 22.
That was one of the nicest, most surprising, nicest feeling in shooting guns. From especially when you think about like 22 LR handguns. Like for me, not really having any history in using them, I think of like I don't know, what is it? The Ruger. Like like the goofy looking target pistol.
Yeah, Mark IV.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I see
goofy
again, look. I'm sorry, but like it just doesn't look like a gun. It looks like this like weird Nerf thing. I don't know.
22 Plinkster out there having a heart attack.
And so like that's all I've ever really known for like 22 LR pistols. So shooting this one, and he leads in with like, we're gonna shoot a 22 pistol. Like, great. Like it's
cool.
old. Like great. Like, this is awesome. And so I show up, and he like gives it to me. I'm like, okay, fine. Like the sights are like these little black nubs that are like one's like curved to the side, and the front sight's like this. And you're like, yeah, this is gonna be awesome. So excited. And then I remember started shooting it, and it felt like a centerfire handgun without the recoil. So like the feel, the weight, everything, how it was functioning, it's like, oh, this is really cool. Actually, this feels like everything I want it to feel like, and it doesn't have the stuff I don't like about shooting this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and then when you suppress that, then it's just stupid, right? Like, because then a suppressed 22 is amazing to begin with.
Oh yeah.
So the Beretta M71, the Model 71, is a PPK sized pistol. So it would be more a PPK S sized.
It's a
pistol.
subcompact.
Yeah, it's a small pistol. It's a was it 10 rounds?
Maybe
It's a 10
single stack.
10
right?
round single stacked. Classic Beretta, open top on the slide. Machining as you would expect from classic 70s Beretta is beautiful. The bluing is really dark. It's that Smith & Wesson like really dark bluing. But specifically to the Model 71, it was used by Mossad and the Israeli Sky Marshals. And there's a pretty ballsy story of like the one operative, Rachamim.
Ridiculous. I showed this to somebody the other day because, like, I was just out having a cigar with somebody. I was like, I have to show you this thing because I was like, this is the most ridiculous set. It's not just one story. This dude was like on multiple ops using a 22 LR pistol against like people with AKs.
Yeah. So the 22. This was during the era of terrorism for Europe. I mean, Israel always has terrorism.
Yeah, they're always getting missiles launched.
But this was the classic era classic era of terrorism. This was the era of terrorism before they really had
I'll help. This was like, this was the height of old terrorism.
Yeah.
Before like those are actual
This is like
terms, right?
like Munich Olympics, Beirut bombing.
Yeah.
So that time.
The
frame.
response to it, Operation Wrath of God. What's that movie called?
Munich.
Yeah. So where Eric Bana played that character going around assassinating people, they were using the Model 71 to cap him. And so the telltale sign is the dead guy has a crap load of 22s in him. It smells Israeli.
Yeah.
It's because they is easy to source ammunition, low recoil, low sound signature, easy to conceal. I mean, it was a pretty ideal weapon for Mossad to use for assassinations for back then. But then the most interesting part was that's the preface to it. The Operation Wrath of God is not the interesting part of the story of the Beretta 71. So the Munich story is not the interesting part of it. It's this guy called Mordecai Rahamim. The dude was a Sayeret Matkal operative to begin with, so their version of Delta, a secretive organization. And the first time he had used it was during it was a Belgian airline that was taken hostage in Tel Aviv. I forgot the exact number, but he was on that op with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and then Ehud Barak, another Prime Minister of Israel, and the terrorists had isolated the plane, and they had to find an excuse to approach the plane because they actually at night they went and stabbed all the tires and let the air out of all the tires, and then said, "Oh no, my friends, the landing gears won't work, so we need mechanics to come." And they
they weren't mechanics.
Yeah, they were not mechanics.
Mechanics.
So like 48 hours or something like that afterwards, they were baking on the tarmac with all the doors and the fuselage open, and these dudes showed up.
We're good. We can finish off on that one.
Okay.
Backup camera.
Actually, we can't because we're not on. Hold on.
Abort.
You can. Well, no, you can't because you're not on camera. Hang on.
Oh, the card's full?
Yeah. Running at 4K, it'll do that to you.
Holy moly. Yeah.
But I can zoom in, so.
All right.
Go.
Cool. All right, so
And
where
we're
were we?
back.
Mordecai Rahamim. All right, so at the it was an LL. Was it an L? No, it wasn't an LL flight. The next one was.
Yeah.
The next one?
Yeah,
Yeah, there were two operations this guy was on using the Beretta 71. So the first one, it was a Belgian Air. I forget the flight number, the tail number. They landed in Tel Aviv. They got taken hostage. They wanted them to fly them to, I forget which African country. I don't know, it was Uganda, but they were demanding the release of a bunch of Palestinians, per usual. So they had grenades, they had all sorts of weapons on board, and they had to get on board. The mechanics had to get on board, so they snuck and they disabled the landing gear so they couldn't take off. And it was really hot in the daytime, so the only way they could get any air circulation was to leave the doors open, but they still had standoff distances. And so at this point, some 30 mechanics showed up and got bussed out over there. And these terrorists, they decided that the French Red Cross dude was, someone they would trust because he's been the messenger going across. And then they told that guy to frisk them as they got there. And he's a Red Cross worker. This is trust the social worker to frisk someone, right? But then they got down and he actually found the one on Netanyahu. And he goes oh my, mon Dieu, my God. And then Netanyahu is like, yes, God is good, my friend. And so these guys, all these mechanics show up and they start staging for the breach. And actually the backstory to it is that one of the guys, they got flown in from different parts of the world so quickly that he didn't have a chance to go to the bathroom. So he's like, hey, Bibi, this is Netanyahu's nickname, I need to take a shit. So they surrounded him, and he took a shit underneath the plane before they went on the op. And then they went back and staged the op and breached. And Mordecai was one of the guys who breached and clapped one of the terrorists in the bathroom with 10 shots, just offloading on him. And that was his first That was one of his operations using a 22.
I
to
don't
take
remember
out
which one
terrorists.
happened
That's
first.
The other one was in Zurich. He was an air marshal, and this was when he was not with Sayeret Matkal. He got reassigned. I don't know. He was with the Israeli air marshals, which they basically fly undercover, kind of like our air marshals. But their standard issue was the Beretta 22, the Model 71. And so these guys, they were just having a good time flying into Zurich, hoping to enjoy some good culture and everything. And they were on their way out, actually. And as they were coming out, a vehicle runs through the gates or the fence of the airport, and there's 4 of them, 4 terrorists with Kalashnikovs like firing at the aircraft, and they actually killed the pilot. I think. Or either the pilot or the co-pilot.
They at least hit him.
Yeah.
Right, and like the guy's telling a story about like you can see the rounds like ripping through the plane.
Yeah.
She's like, well, I had to do something.
And
there's a 10-round magged 22 pistol, subcompact.
Subcompact.
Yeah.
At that.
And
yeah.
he had grenades. They had grenades.
The terrorists had grenades.
They were
too.
hurling grenades, and he was worried that if the grenades popped the wing that housed all the jet fuel, that the entire aircraft would blow up and everyone would die. So, first of all, I don't know what terrorists concocts an idea of running. The idea is to run through the gates, throw grenades until we could somehow magically board a plane by throwing grenades and shooting Kalashnikovs at it. But the plane stops because they took out the pilot or the co-pilot. And Mordecai punches open the pilot's window, leans out, like gangsta leans out with like a freaking Beretta 22, like clack, 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 clack. Empties a magazine, runs out the back, changes his other mag, and starts running. He ran out of the plane.
He leaves the plane and aggresses towards them.
Assaulting
and subdues them.
Yeah. So he killed one, wounded another one, and was choking out the third one after he ran out of ammunition without a single shot landing on him. And he did all that with a freaking Beretta 22 the size of your Glock 42.
That's amazing.
Like,
Out there doing the Lord's work.
the size of them on Mordecai. I don't know how he got on the plane.
or something
Yeah.
to carry those around.
Yeah.
Plane. That's why he was on a plane to begin with. Dudes, if you've enjoyed this episode, go check out
9-hole reviews.
9-hole Reviews.
9-hole
on YouTube.
podcast.
9-hole podcast. We're going to definitely have them back. We're definitely going to be doing some shooting with y'all at some point here in the future, especially since we hang out at the same range. And I want to thank y'all very, very much for your time today and coming out. And
Hey, it was our pleasure. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, this was awesome.
we really appreciate
A lot
it.
of fun.
All right. If you've made it this far in the podcast or on YouTube, make sure you let us know how you like it in the comments on Facebook. Wherever you're at, drop us that 1-star review on Apple to let us know you like the digs. And if it's Christmas when we're dropping this episode, Merry Christmas.
Indeed.
Thank you. Ciao.
Sweet.